Hello friend, thanks for joining me for another book chat. Today let's spend some time with The Wind Up Bird Chronicle by Haruki Murakami. This book was originally published in its final form in 1995. Got an English translation a couple of years later, and this is the Jay Rubin translation that I read into English. So yeah, The Wind Up Bird Chronicle by Haruki Murakami. This is the 9th of the Murakami novels that I've read and chatted here on my channel. So if you're interested in the others, you can check out Wind Pinball, A Wild Sheep Chase, Hardboiled Wonderland and the End of the World, Norwegian Wood, Dance, 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 Kafka on the Shore, 1Q84, and Colorless Sakura Tozaki and His Years of Pilgrimage. I will link to those chats down in the details below, but needless to say, I do love Murakami's novels. So what's this one about though? First of all, I want to just say about spoilers, so this chat's going to be spoiler-free. This book itself is not so much of a linear, plot-driven novel, but nonetheless, I'm not going to talk about anything that I think would detract from a first-time reader's experience with the book. So, our main character in this book is Toru Okada. I think he's probably around 30-year-old man. He worked before in a lawyer's office, but he was laid off. He lives with his wife, Kumiko, who his wife works in the publishing industry. They seem to be pretty happy together. You know, she earns enough money that she's not that interested in him going back to work, and he's sort of half-heartedly looking for another job, but it doesn't seem really to be his priority. But they seem to be living, you know, together comfortably and happily. They have a cat. This cat has gone missing as the novel opens, and they have not been able to find the cat. So Kumiko suggests to Toru Okada to go and check the alley while she's at work one day. Go and see if the cat's in the alley that's out behind their house. There is this alley that's been closed off or blocked, which is kind of a recurring theme throughout this book, is something blocked. Blocked, like a time, fate, and reality is blocked. It's not flowing, you know, as it should, and we'll talk more about that here in a bit. But anyway, Toru Okada goes to the end of this alley to look for the cat, and he's sort of hanging out there, and he hears this girl calling to him, and her name is Mei Kashihara, and she lives in this house that backs up to this alley, and she's out in her backyard sunbathing, and she calls him over, and they have a chat, and she tells him about the house across the alley from her house, which is this abandoned house that's there. And she tells him that, you know what, stray cats come and go there all the time, it seems like. She tells him about the history of this house, and this house apparently has a history of misfortune to those who have lived in it, and so it stood empty there for quite some time. So Mei Kashihara ends up telling Toru Okada also that there is a dry well on the property. So this dry well that's on this property is going to figure prominently in the story. Not just this well, but another well as well. And this sort of symbolism of water not flowing, right? Like that's another symbol of time, reality, or fate not flowing, you know, as it should. So Mei Kashihara seems like really old for her years, though. She seems kind of wise. She's probably around 16. She and Toru Okada throughout the course of the book actually become pretty good friends. I would say she might be his best friend, this 30-year-old. So that's kind of interesting. But Toru Okada still has not found the cat. So his wife Kumiko insists that he contact a psychic that her brother recommended to help find the cat. Kumiko's brother, her family in general, is this mysterious part of the book. It's sort of sinister history. The psychic's name is Malta Kano. So Malta, like the island in the Mediterranean, she took the name from the island in the Mediterranean because she had gone there some years previously and done research on the water there. So she's very into water and the properties of water and the special water that exists in certain places. And again, this is sort of that symbolism of water flowing, things flowing as it should. Malta has a sister known as Creta, like Crete, the island of Crete. Both she and her sister Malta both wear really unusual clothes. Malta wears this really bright red vinyl hat everywhere, and Creta wears styling from like clothes and hairstyles from the 1960s, so she looks a bit anachronistic. Creta, we later learn, is a prostitute of the mind. So I'm not going to get into that here, but that was pretty interesting. So eventually, though, in a sort of relatively early on in the book, Toru Okada's wife, Kumiko, also disappears. And much of the story then is his search for her. But along the way, we meet some really unique characters and get a bit of their stories as well, and they all sort of intertwine and interact. So one of these is Lieutenant Mamiya, and he was an officer of the Japanese army in occupied Manchuria during World War II. And he actually spent some time at the bottom of a dry well in Mongolia. That was sort of the pivotal event of his life. And so we have that theme again of the dry well. Some other additional characters that we meet along the way are Nutmeg Akasaka and her son Cinnamon. Nutmeg was also in occupied Manchuria as a child, and so her story intertwines not only with the lieutenants, but also with Toru Okada's in different ways. So Cinnamon, her son, is a very handsome young man. He doesn't speak. There was an event that happened early in his life, and he just stopped speaking after that. And he communicates through hand motions and mouthing words, and people seem to understand his meaning quite well. He eventually writes a collection of stories known as the Wind Up Bird Chronicle. So yeah, and I'm going to talk a bit more about the Wind Up Bird here in a bit. But Cinnamon and Nutmeg are also very integral characters to Toru Okada's journey as he's searching for the cat, as well as his missing wife. And also, I think, to get that flow going like it needs to go back in his life. So at the beginning of the novel, about the Wind Up Bird, at the beginning of the novel, Toru Okada is reading a newspaper, and it sort of introduces us to his version of the Wind Up Bird. The Wind Up Bird that's in the stories by Cinnamon is a little different, but sort of the same general symbol. But anyway, the quote is this: "As happened each morning, I heard the Wind Up Bird winding its spring in a tree somewhere. I closed the paper, sat up with my back against a post, and looked out at the garden. Soon the bird gave its rasping cry once more, a long creaking sound that came from the top of the neighbor's pine tree. I strained to see through the branches, but there was no sign of the bird, only its cry as always. And so the world had its spring wound for the day." So Toru Okada and his wife Kumiko often heard this bird in the morning, and they would remark that the world has had its spring rewound, and because the bird sounded sort of mechanical, and so the day would then unfold. Early in the novel, Toru Okada notices that he's actually stopped hearing the wind-up bird in the morning. The quote says, "I saw myself as the wind-up bird flying through the summer sky, lighting on the branch of a huge tree somewhere, winding the world's spring. If there really was no more wind-up bird, someone would have to take on its duties. Someone would have to wind the world's spring in its place. Otherwise, the spring would run down and the delicately functioning system would grind to a halt." So I just think that's so cool. The bird is another symbol of things aren't flowing quite right in Toru Okada's life, right? The flow has been blocked. The wind-up bird has stopped singing. There's also a concrete bird in the backyard of that abandoned house with the well in the alley. Another symbol of the bird being silent. It's a statue of a concrete bird. But I just think that's so interesting, like if you've got a wind-up bird in your life, these people in your life that, that keep your reality going, and if they're missing, your reality shifts, and you're going to have to find your way to a new reality, which is what our character is doing here. So, different realities are a recurring theme in Murakami novels, I find, and that's also the case here. Toru Okada tells us, "I rarely suffer lengthy emotional distress from contact with other people. A person may anger or annoy me, but not for long. I can distinguish between myself and another as beings of two different realms. It's a kind of talent, by which I do not mean to boast. It's not an easy thing to do. So if you can do it, it is kind of a talent, a special power." So I'm here, and you're in my realm, and you're over there in your realm. And so I don't have to have an expectation that you're going to behave like I want you to in my realm, because it's my realm, not yours. You go over there and behave the way you do in your realm, and I'll behave the way I do in my realm, and we'll be fine. I think is kind of what he's saying there. But that theme of different realities is, it kind of recurs through the novels of Murakami, and it's one of my favorite things about his books. So some other themes that I saw here that I've seen in some other Murakami novels are, first of all, whales. Whales appear in some other of the Murakami novels. Cats, recurring theme. Characters with unusual name and characteristics. We've already kind of talked about that. They have other names, but at one point, Toru Okada asks Nutmeg, "What is your name?" And she's like, "Why is that important?" Because what he needs to know is really her. I think maybe what they're trying to say here is you can't really know a person. The name is an identity, is something that we attach to a person that gives us the illusion that we know them, but we really don't. I think might be part of the symbolism there. Not sure, but anyway, pretty cool. So the alienation of Murakami's novels, this sort of different realities, I think some people interpret that a lot of times as alienation. I don't really see that so much. I see it a different way, that we do all occupy our own worlds, right? My world is not your world. Even though we can interact with each other, it's not the same world. We don't inhabit the same world. So some other Murakami themes that are in this book that are in others: weird phone calls, food prep. Food and food prep, figures prominently as you would expect in a Murakami novel. The other thing is classical music references. There's a couple here related to birds. The book opens actually with the Rossini opera, The Thieving Magpie. And then eventually also in the book, we hear, it's the seventh movement of Schumann's Forest Scenes, and it's called Bird as Prophet. All right, I think I'm about out of time, so I will close the chat with that. I did love this one. I really love all the Murakami novels that I have read, and I will be reading some additional ones in the future. I've got Sputnik Sweetheart. I've had that on my radar forever, so I might get to that one next. But my next chat is actually going to be some Jane Austen, Sense and Sensibility. I have finished this already, and I will have a chat on it coming up soon. So until next time, take care.